Tonight on Gangs of Oz.
This is a robbery! Everybody, freeze!
Meet some of our most feared bank gangs, from Jockey Smith's crew to the Sledgehammer Gang, and Norman Lung Lee's band of thugs.
They were like jackals. We regarded those people as jackals of society. They'd look around for a weekend mall and they'd tear it down.
The extraordinary siege that brought a major Australian city to a standstill.
The gunman points the gun at me and just said, piss off or I'll fucking shoot you.
Tonight, the real story is told exclusively by those at the centre of the drama.
He got to the stage where he just said, right, we're going.
Realistically, nothing was under control.
How the police hunt down these violent gangs.
4 fully loaded, appear to be fully loaded magazines.
And for the first time, one bank robber tells what it's really like to do business at the point of a gun.
You don't feel scared, you feel good, everything was moving in kind of slow motion.
What you're watching is a modern bank gang in action. An overnight smash and grab. It's dangerous stuff, the stakes are high, and the adrenaline is pumping. These gangs risk their lives every time they pull off a job, and all for a payday they haven't earned. It's always been the same. The Ram Raiders of the 21st century aren't so very different to their gun-toting predecessors. From Ned Kelly to Edward Jockey Smith. From Russell Mad Dog Cox to Ray Denny, Australia has a violent and bloody history of bank robbers. Some gangs would pull off 2 or more hold-ups in a single day. One of our most audacious bank robbers was Hacky Adahan. You might not recognise the name, but if you were in Sydney in the summer of '87, you'll almost certainly remember the chaos he caused. In those days, Adahan was staging a hold-up at least once a week, making off with thousands of dollars at a time, and then blowing the lot. His violent run ended spectacularly one sweltering Sydney afternoon. He decided to attempt 3 bank jobs in a row. It proved one too many.
The action started at about 3:30 this afternoon. A gunman who allegedly had just held up 2 other banks in the city tried to hold up the Commonwealth Bank in Lower George Street.
Police were already responding to the first 2 robberies when they were diverted.
What seemed to be pandemonium there at the time. A lot of armed police, heavily armed police, TRG with their helmets and their rifles, had set up a cordon.
The siege was broadcast live. All over the country, people were listening to their radios or watching developments live on television.
After we had dispatched our troops around the vicinity, it was decided that I would draw an M16 and position myself in a building that was under construction across from the bank.
John Nagel can be seen here trying to line up a clean shot.
Should the situation have turned nasty, it would have been up to me to take the person out, as they say.
Adahan was trapped and desperate, and he had dozens of hostages. Every terrifying moment was played out in front of the cameras.
Police snipers took up strategic positions in high buildings, looking into the bank. The whole block was closed off.
The teller that day was Jeff Finlay. Jeff has never before spoken in detail about what happened.
It was only a matter of minutes before you could see police lining up on the exterior of the building and on the hoardings of the building site across the road.
With the bank full of hostages, the police weren't about to make any sudden moves.
Some time later, 4 women hostages were released from the bank, one of them 6 months pregnant, the bank's accountant. 2 of the women were taken to hospital and treated for shock.
The police were trying to negotiate with him and trying to have him release people. He initially released the customers that were in the branch. He let them go, and after a period of time, he let the female staff go and just kept the male personnel as his hostages.
What happened next was straight out of a Hollywood movie.
The attitude of the gunman Adahan was that he'd had enough. He wasn't going to negotiate with them at all. And eventually he got to the stage where he just said, right, we're going.
Then at 5:27, about 2 hours after the drama started, the move at last was made. But it wasn't the police who made it, it was the gunman.
A call had come over the radio that there was a movement inside the bank. Next thing, he just came straight out the door with the hostages around him and a jumper or a carding or something over his head and a gun pointing to the back of one of the hostages' heads.
Adahan had instructed us to encircle him and for each of us to put a hand on his head, so there was at least some confusion.
That's Jeff Findlay at the back of the group.
The heavily armed police swarmed in. but held their fire.
Sydney had never experienced anything like it, and police had no idea how to deal with the situation.
The gunman and the hostages were moving quite slowly, but there was hectic movement with people in the background. And not only were the police trying to keep pedestrians out of the way and move traffic, we then had emergency services and we had the media arriving in hordes. So there was almost a traffic jam with pedestrians heading one way and media heading the other.
With his gun still pointed at his hostages' heads, the gunman kept casually going up Pitt Street.
We walked down the lane. There was a TV cameraman that was on the right-hand side, camera rolling. Adahan decided that the camera was no good, so he kicked that over. We just kept walking down the lane. As we walked down the lane and then progressively up Pitt Street, the police kept clearing everybody out of their cars, told them to lock it, and effectively just get out of the way.
There was no containment whatsoever.
Adahan quickly commandeered a car. The unthinkable had happened. The gunman and his hostages were mobile. The police weren't letting him out of their sight, and neither was the media.
I don't know what I was thinking. I was armed with a notebook and a pen, and I started jogging beside the hostage car, trying to get a quote from somebody. The windows were open, and I said something like, you know, are you guys all right in there? What's happening in there? And next thing I know, the gunman points the gun at me and just said, piss off or I'll fucking shoot you. Well, that brought me back to reality, I can tell you, and I just hit the deck. And I thought, my goodness, what the hell am I doing?
When the car drove off, the offender, Adahan, he was sitting on the console. The bank manager was in the driver's seat driving, and there was a fairly big fellow sitting in the front passenger seat.
I was sitting on the bucket seat on the passenger side, in the same seat as Adahan himself, so we shared that bucket seat.
He's in the car, he's got hostages, he's got the gun. Wait and wait to see what he does.
And so began Sydney's version of Dog Day Afternoon.
I jumped into a police vehicle and we got directly behind his vehicle. I had no idea where he was going, and I don't know if he had any idea where he was going at the time.
By now, the police force had swelled to more than 30 vehicles, including the Tactical Response Group, the Special Weapons Squad, the Dog Squad and Pol Air.
I've never came across a situation like this before, where the scenario started to become mobile. Never before and never since.
So we just sort of followed him probably 10, 15 feet back, close enough that we could see what was going on. We didn't want to get too close and spook him and make him do something silly, because at that stage he's got 5 hostages in the car, and we know he's got a handgun. We also knew that he had a sawed-off rifle that he used to use in his holdups. So he pretty much had firepower in the car that was of a concern to us.
We just couldn't take the chance on doing anything out of hand that might have triggered him to do something that could have been fatal.
As Adahan cruised around the city, the chase began to resemble more of a ticker tape parade.
Realistically, nothing was under control. People were hanging over balconies and waving.
It was madness. Here we had a rolling siege, a moving siege. We had police cars, we had media cars, we had choppers in the sky. I've never seen anything like it. It truly was bedlam.
It's always going through your mind, what's going on? Where's he going? Can we sort of get someone in front of him and head this off and try and because obviously anything mobile like that is just impossible to handle.
With the light fading, the police realised they needed to take control of the situation. There was a lift bridge directly ahead. That gave the police an idea.
We would received advice that we could put the spit bridge up. We could get it raised and that would stop it, and we'd sort of try and gain control that way. This is as good a place as anywhere to take a stand.
The timing was quite crucial to raise the bridge with the least amount of people in front of the offender's car, but also to ensure that he didn't get across the bridge.
We were sort of down from him, we're only 10 feet away, because obviously we were the lead car behind him. The negotiators had come up to the back of our car and were trying to talk to him over a loud hailer.
You're okay, no one's trying to hurt you and no one will.
Yeah, he just leaned out of the car and said, "What? You think I'm fucking stupid? You just want me to give up? You want this all to be over?" And of course, the negotiator said, "Yeah, well, we do. We want everybody to come out of this alive." And he just, "No, fuck you."
Instructed Graham Stewart to do a U-turn over the median strip. He's obviously just shouting instructions at this stage, and they weren't very sensible.
We decided once he stops again, that's it. We're out and we're going to get up on that car before he has a chance to do anything else.
There was scurrying going on everywhere. We again tucked in behind the guy, and a couple of hundred yards up the hill, we contained that vehicle in yet another spot.
He was at his wit's end because if he got caught, he had plenty more to answer for. So you had to realise that the danger was there if he went over the top.
Obviously the plan was for the negotiators to talk to him, and then he would surrender, but he wasn't playing to the script, unfortunately. So we just, for want of a better word, we pretty much just reacted.
Coming up, the Atahan siege comes to a shocking and bloody conclusion. Crazed bank robber Haki Atahan is holding 5 hostages in a car. He's surrounded by police and he's desperate.
Having stopped the vehicle, I got out of the police vehicle and was able to take up a position behind the rear window of the offending car. Steve Canellis was calling on the offender to drop his weapon and give up. We really did have a Mexican standoff, and we're waiting for that magic moment where something changes, circumstances that allows us to try and take the upper hand.
Stop! It's over now, Atahan.
I saw the offender's hand move.
Give it up!
He made no indication, no warnings, no threats about what he intended to do. He just quickly whipped the gun hand from the bank manager's head and fired in the direction of Steve Canellis. At that point in time, the terms of engagement changed.
Any hope of negotiation vanished the moment Atahan pulled the trigger.
And within a split second, both Steve Packer and I fired upon the offender.
Come on, get out! Come on, go! Get out! Out!
When I took the shot, I was 5 or 6 feet. Wasn't very far at all. The tricky part was shooting between the heads in the back seat. Steve Packer shot him through the temple, and I shot him through the neck.
It was very, very fast in the whole scenario at the end of it. It did not last very long at all.
Gunman 35-year-old Haki Atahan, unemployed of Manly, lay dead in the gutter.
There could have been a whole range of things that might have happened. I think we were lucky in that we knew what we needed to do in that sort of situation. I think we were lucky that we had a reasonably level-headed group of people that were involved in it. The end situation was that we felt it best to do what we were told and leave the police to do their job. In the end, the police did their job and finished the situation on the spit.
There could have been quite a few more bodies had things turned out differently and had the police not done what they did.
Detective Steve Canellis of the Armed Hold-Up Squad and 2 of the hostages were rushed to hospital. Canellis had been shot between the eyes and the bridge of his nose. The bullet travelled through his throat and into his chest before fragmenting.
Steve Canellis must be the luckiest man alive. Shot in the head and still here to tell the tale.
The bullet struck me there, and it's according to what the doctor said, it's gone through and it's missed everything of importance on the way through. It's just nicked the back of my skull and travelled down the back of my throat, and it's now there, it's lodged intact in one piece just under my collarbone. People don't sustain injuries like that and get shot like that where I was shot and normally live to tell the story.
You had hostages, you had gunshots, you had hostages' families seeing members of their family live on television actually being taken hostage. No, I've never seen anything like it since. In one afternoon, this man had turned Sydney upside down and turned a summer's afternoon into an international incident.
One of Australia's most notorious bank gangs was led by Jockey Smith. So-called because of his small stature. Jockey's rap sheet was 4 pages long, with convictions ranging from petty theft to attempted murder. But he's best known for the violent armed robberies he committed in the late 70s, targeting banks in Sydney and Melbourne and all points in between.
There's gangs of bank robbers who would arm themselves with firearms, disguise themselves with balaclavas, rush the bank, threaten the tellers, take the money, and then decamp.
Bob Godden spent a good chunk of his police career hunting down Jockey Smith's gang. So he was straight on the road when word came through that Jockey was hiding on the south coast of New South Wales. Godden tracked his man down to a quiet country town. Then they got a tip-off about a suspicious character riding a stolen pushbike.
We saw this person on a pushbike, middle-aged person on a pushbike, travelling on the footpath on the opposite direction. travelled back and saw this gentleman entering a phone box. So we pulled up adjacent to the box.
That routine stop was about to become a life and death struggle.
Had we known it was Smith that was in the phone box, we would have approached that phone box with shotguns.
Mate, phone's not working. Police, mate. What's your name? Dead Daniels. Why? Who was mate? Got the idea on you, haven't you?
When Godwin was within arm's length, Smith pulled a gun and pressed it into his stomach.
And as Smith was pulling the trigger, the hammer was coming back a little way, but couldn't go back to a full cock because this part of my hand was stopping the hammer from going full cock.
That's it.
Bob Godden's life was only saved by an incredible stroke of luck.
Had he fired, in all probability I would have been dead.
Smith was sent to jail for 14 years.
I suppose you could put him in the same category as a lot of bushrangers, from earlier on. They lived a violent life and were ruled by the gun.
Jockey Smith served his time, but he clearly didn't learn his lesson. Soon after he was released, he pulled a gun on another cop. This time, though, the policeman was armed. Jockey was shot dead. Next on Gangs of Oz, meet Australia's smartest bank robber. Just how much cash did he really get away with? A 30-year-old mystery finally answered. Most bank gangs steal several $1,000s at a time, a fair return for a dishonest day's work. But for a schemer like Michael Hurley, it was chicken feed. Hurley and his gang pulled off what many believe was the country's biggest bank robbery in 1988. It's certainly one of our biggest mysteries. Up until tonight, no one in the criminal community has breathed a word about just how much was stolen. The target was the National Australia Bank in Sydney's Chinatown.
Seven National News with Greg Granger. Detectives believe the same bandits who stole more than $7 million from a Rose Bay bank 4 years ago are responsible for the latest break-in.
The men carried with them explosives, oxyacetylene equipment and a thermic lance, a device capable of cutting through the 60-centimetre thick walls of the bank's main vault.
Graham Abbo Henry was Hurley's close friend and a convicted crim. He quizzed his mate about the so-called Great Chinese Takeaway not long before he died. Hurley told him everything.
I know that he confessed this on his deathbed. He had an extremely good circle of people. Everyone was expertise at something. Someone was a great thief and great at locks. Someone could disalarm alarms. Everyone's got to be good at something, otherwise you don't get a start.
The raid was carried out with precision. Detectives say the gang could have had help from inside the bank.
Hurley and his gang crept into the bank via a first-floor window, accessed from a building site next door. Then they waited for nightfall. As the rest of the city prepared to celebrate New Year's Eve, the gang began ransacking dozens of safety deposit boxes. Exactly what was in the boxes? Well, the bank didn't know, and its customers, mostly local Chinese business people, weren't telling. The robbery was a sensation. Some estimated the thieves got away with up to $100 million in cash, gold, gems and jewellery. But up until tonight, it's all just been speculation. Graham Abbo Henry says Hurley told him the truth, and he says the police and the media got it all wrong.
Let's just say that there's alleged to have been millions upon millions stolen. Supposed to be one of the biggest, best crimes of all time. Well, that was absolute rubbish. There was actually a lot of diamonds there, but they were all fake. Any gold that was there, I believe, the story goes that it was melted down and sold on the streets. The odds of 100 million, 10 million, 5 million, 2 million would be way out of order. Way out of order. The word on the street was that it was under $1 million. Considering that there was allegedly quite a number of people involved, it would have been a pretty small payday.
Michael Hurley should have made enough money to retire after that robbery. Instead, he went from one criminal enterprise to the next, eventually dying in jail in 2007. Back in the 80s, joining a gang could be a lucrative career option. You didn't really need any special skills other than a steady set of nerves.
In those days, there was no pop-up screens. That was the main thing. So you could just jump over the counter. You could get behind the area where the toilet drawers were, where the safe was.
Even a rookie like John could plan and stage a hold-up.
It was a challenge. I wondered whether I could do it. whether I'd have the balls to rob a bank. So I had to get the gear together, you know, the things I'd need, a bag for the money and overalls and the motorcycle helmet and so on, you know. So I got all those things ready and then put them on at home and stood in front of the mirror and said, "Mr. Holder, don't move! Give me the money! Don't you move!" Had a look how it looks, you know, in the mirror. Give me the money! Give it to me now! The moment I left home to go and do the robbery, I was fairly nervous, of course, you know. I drove there, parked my car a few blocks away from the bank. In those days, I didn't even know how to steal a car. That was why I used my own car, you see. And I thought it'll be okay as long as it's far enough away from the bank and no one sees me, you know, going from the bank and getting into the car. I put the helmet on at the last minute, opened the doors to the bank, and ran towards the counter. Nobody move! Whipped the gun out of the bag and threw the bag down to the tellers. Fill it now! Felt good. I felt calm in terms of everything seemed to be moving in slow motion. Come on! Hurry up! I could see and hear every movement that was going on around me and aware of it all. You want some? Huh? Quickly! The moment they started putting money into the bag, I thought, you know, oh great, this is good. Now, nobody move! I'm watching you! And I observed, while I was walking away, that no one was looking at me. I got down 20 metres down the road and turned into a lane, and I looked back and I could see no one was following me. So I started to feel good.
But John wasn't in the clear just yet. He'd made a simple rookie mistake.
This fellow saw me and saw the car that I got into and wrote down the number plate. He thought I looked suspicious. It was just unlucky. No one else thought so. Just this one fellow. And that was how I was caught.
Up next on Gangs of Oz, how getting arrested made John a better bank robber.
I wasn't nervous during the robberies. I was calm. In fact, I enjoyed it.
And the feared sledgehammer gang.
It's a whole package of viciousness, threats, weaponry.
How one simple mistake brought a couple of career criminals undone. The 1980s were boom times for gangs planning the big heist. Back then, banks were pretty soft targets. Although you still needed street smarts to pull off the perfect job. John held up one bank and landed in jail. Still, that single botched robbery ended up being his big break. Prison was just what this bandit in training needed. When John got out, he was 4 years older and a whole lot smarter.
From being in prison, I knew all the little traps. I knew where the alarms were in the bank from other prisoners telling me, teaching me those things. I knew about the boxes from other prisoners. I knew about dye bombs, bundles of notes. Prison really is a college of knowledge where you can learn virtually anything you want to know.
The prison's mentoring program taught John that all he needed was a toy gun to stage an armed robbery. Over the next 6 months, he successfully held up more than a dozen banks.
All I was doing was showing a note on a small piece of paper. Originally I wrote that out at home and I wrote, "Have a gun, give me the money." I never once took the gun out and pointed it at anybody. And underneath the jacket, tucked into my belt of my pants, I had a plastic toy pistol. I wasn't nervous during the robberies. I was calm. In fact, I enjoyed it.
John got away with around $15,000 every time he hit a bank. Over the course of his career, he probably got away with more than $100,000. Nowadays, though, he walks the straight and narrow.
Looking back, I'm glad that I never hurt anybody. I'm glad I never tried to terrorise anybody by, pointing a gun down their face or something. I didn't do any of that.
While John was gently relieving tellers of their cash, one Victorian gang was taking an entirely different approach to bank robbery. The Sledgehammer Gang was one of the most vicious and feared group of bandits in Australian history.
Their basic theme in those days, what they would come into a bank, generally late afternoon, bring with them a sledgehammer, which was used to bash open the manager's door. Once they'd corralled him, they would have access to all the locations where they needed to get the money. You can only imagine what it would be like the person hanging on to the end of the gun as he got the ability to pull the trigger that belongs to that gun.
The Sledgehammer Gang terrorised Melbourne for years before they disbanded to pursue solo projects. Childhood mates Peter Clunes and Andreas Gurges stuck together. They ditched the sledgehammers and polished their technique.
Well, I think they were regarded as probably the best armed robbers in certainly the state, if not the country. They were very closely aligned. They were suspicious of everything, everyone.
Police weren't going to get a heads up on what the gang was planning next. What they did have was a clear understanding of their MO. And a robbery in Adelaide had all the hallmarks of a Gurges and Clunes hit.
Their weaponry, they had a vast choice of weaponry to choose from. They used wigs, disguises, balaclavas, anything to throw off the scent. And the disguises would always be different.
Gurges and Clunes planned to intercept a cash delivery to a suburban bank, but the job didn't go smoothly.
They were confronted by one of the Army Guard employees, and Gurges put his revolver to the shoulder of the Army Guard fellow and fired a shot, which then penetrated his shoulder and exited and struck an elderly customer in the throat.
Both victims survived. Gurges and Clunes escaped the scene, but police were pretty sure they knew what they'd do next.
Well, after the bank robbery at Adelaide, they couldn't get back to Melbourne quick enough. We knew that they would send their stuff back, that is the proceeds of the crime and all their equipment, disguises and weaponry, back via air freight the next day.
Well, it's not in it, definitely.
Police rushed to the airport and eventually tracked down a package containing disguises, weapons and cash.
It's pacey stuff.
They replaced the contraband with phone books so Gurges and Clunes wouldn't notice any change in weight. They then waited for the gang to collect their booty.
They were intercepted by the detectives and, of course, charged and sent back to Adelaide, where they happily attend needlework classes at Yatala Prison.
Gurges and Clunes each received jail terms of 16 years. Armour Guard vans were becoming increasingly popular targets among the gangs. That's because the banks had finally woken up and tightened their security.
People still try and rob banks, but effectively they don't get much and they quickly go on to other things. If you can't get the money out of a bank, you'll move on to some other target.
Pop-up security screens meant that robbing banks was as dangerous for the crooks as it was for the staff and customers.
While his accomplice held a customer at gunpoint, Kovacs vaulted the counter and met his death. He was pinned to the ceiling as the bank's security screens rocketed into action.
But every armed robbery is risky. Coming up, the daring payroll heist that turned Melbourne Airport into a shooting gallery.
They were like jackals and had no compunction about hurting the people that got in the way.
As bank security improved, the gang started to look for other ways of making a quick buck. Payroll vans and armoured cars were considered soft targets.
They were like jackals. We regarded these people as jackals of society. They'd look around for a weak animal and they'd tear it down. That's what they do. And they'd have no compunction about hurting the people that got in the way.
Ray Watson was in charge of the Victoria Police Armed Robbery Squad. He was determined to bring down the gangs, whatever it took. And he had his eye on a couple of especially vicious types. Norman Lung Lee and Stephen Butchie.
Lee and Barchi were very hard criminals. They were hard-nosed criminals. Lee would not give you the time of day. Barchi was a venomous snake of a thing who believed he was a big-time crook.
One night, Butchie and another gang member, Stephen Asling, met a loose-lipped security guard who liked nothing better than a few cleansing ales after work. Butchie and Asling bought the man more drinks than he could handle and then started quizzing him about the nuts and bolts of his job.
It was then when he mentioned the money that went to the airport on a regular basis of fairly large denominations that pricked their ears up.
Police watched closely as the gang laid the groundwork for their next job. These photos show Butchie and Asling casing their target, Melbourne Airport.
They were obviously planning some type of armed robbery. It was obvious. You'd have to be blind Freddy to not understand what they're up to.
When the big day arrived, Ray Watson immediately called in the Special Operations Group.
We watched the armoured guard truck pull up outside the NCD freight terminal. We watched two guards get out of the truck with their red vinyl bags, which had over $1 million in it. They were making their way to the entrance of the Ansett Air Freight Terminal when Lee and Barchi emerged. They were both armed with handguns. They were both disguised, wearing various forms of masks.
Lee wore a Michael Jackson mask. Barchi was disguised as Madonna.
I can imagine the feeling of euphoria as they're running back to the car with this multi-million dollars of cash, untraceable.
When the police made their move, the getaway driver Asling panicked and stepped on the gas.
There was an exchange of gunshots. Norman Lung Lee was shot dead, died instantaneously. Stephen Barchi received a fairly major wound to his shoulder.
These dramatic police photographs show Butchie and Lee escaping with the loot, just moments before they were gunned down. The getaway driver didn't get very far.
And he sped down a side road where the Special Operations Group were waiting, and we had every exit covered. They had a four-wheel drive with the bull bars on the front, and they basically just had a head-on collision with it.
Butchie finally recovered, but both he and his co-offender Asling went to jail for a very long time.
The reality is that a vicious gang of people who would stop at nothing have been stopped.
From about 150 bank robberies a year in the 1980s, Ray Watson says the armed hold-up squad has cut that number to about 20.
It's a classic example of the good guys winning over the bad guys, as I said.
The gangs are always looking for a way to make a quick buck, and those modern-day money boxes called ATMs are especially tempting.
Well, it was a new phenomenon. It was large amounts of cash in ATMs, and once the criminal element became aware that they could readily access this cash through stealing the ATMs, they became an obvious target.
At first, the gangs used winches to drag the ATMs into the back of getaway trucks. The machines would be opened later, out of sight.
Some of the machines were quite capable of being just picked up and carried away, the smaller machines. The larger machines could be pulled out and removed to another area.
This was the method favoured by Patrick Guthrie and his partner, Adam O'Shea. The cops had been watching Guthrie and his partner for weeks when they intercepted a flurry of phone calls confirming the gang would be targeting an ATM at Morrison on the New South Wales Central Coast.
We secreted a tactical team, a group of tactical police in close proximity to where the ATMs were located.
This never-before-seen police footage shows what happened next.
Police tactical team secreted a short distance away, and they emerged and immediately confronted the two offenders and told them they were under arrest and demanded they get on the ground. Game was up.
The arrest went exactly to plan. It had to. Guthrie had packed enough firepower to start a small war.
It was obviously he wasn't prepared to go quietly or meekly. He, possibly by trying to get the firearm out, he was intending to shoot it out with police.
Police refer to the operation as the Battle of Morisset. And little wonder. Check out the cache of weapons they seized.
So it appears to be a fully loaded magazine, 7.62 by 39mm calibre. Four fully loaded, they appear to be fully loaded magazines, suitable for the same assault rifles.
Plus we found an additional bag containing about 200 rounds of ammunition for the rifles. They also had a further quantity of 357 ammunition for one handgun. It was just because of the amount of weapons involved. Obviously it could have turned into a very nasty situation.
Guthrie is serving 4.5 years in jail. O'Shea received a reduced sentence in exchange for his testimony. Still to come, the Fast and the Furious. These are some of the most daring and dangerous robberies you'll ever see. By the 1990s, ATMs were springing up all over the country. And with up to $300,000 in cash inside each machine, they were a tempting target. The gangs soon came up with a new and very dangerous method of stealing them. It's called ram raiding.
They were usually small freestanding ATMs that could be accessed by motor vehicles. The gangs were using four-wheel drives or larger vehicles to knock the machines over, and then they were lifted up and carried away in a secondary van.
In 1990, there were around 4,500 ATMs in Australia. By 2004, there were 21,000. The number of ram raids skyrocketed. Police in Sydney were dealing with more than one a week.
Mid-2005, there had been an escalation of attacks on ATMs in the Sydney metropolitan area involving motor vehicles ramming freestanding ATMs. In that time, over 40 separate gangs were investigated.
The gangs became increasingly brazen. Here a large four-wheel drive rams through the front door of a major shopping complex, a larger vehicle trailing behind. The robbery is carried out like a military operation.
In some instances, the gangs, to access the target machines, would breach a shopping centre and drive up to 100 metres into a mall to access a vulnerable machine. Basically, you'd have anywhere between 3 to 4 or 5 males lifting the freestanding ATMs up and placing them into a van.
Sophisticated new alarm systems alert police the moment an ATM is attacked. That stopped the ram raiders in their tracks. But the gangs are always honing their craft. And nowadays they've taken to pumping ATMs with gas and blowing them out of bank walls. That's what this gang was planning to do when they broke into the back access area of an ATM early one morning. Every moment of the robbery is recorded by a series of cameras, both outside on the street and inside the building. The bandits hear the police sirens and bolt without stealing a cent. But there's more at risk here than just being caught. Blowing up ATMs is a dangerous game, and the practice has claimed lives overseas. But robbing banks has always been a risky business, and it's that risk, as much as the rewards, that motivates most bandits.
Still to this day, if I'm having a bad day, I think to myself, boy, I'd like to go and, rob a bank or blow up an ATM or something. Anybody that was thinking of doing that today, my opinion is that really it isn't worth it. The only feel-good moment, I suppose, is when you're actually committing the crime and you've got the adrenaline rush and it's all happening and that's good. And then, before the crime, you're feeling scared and nervous. And after the crime, you're feeling scared and nervous. And, word might get around and pretty soon the SWAT team will be knocking on your door with a sledgehammer. So you've got all that worry afterwards. So if you weigh that up, no, it's not worth it.
He was a hero, a role model to our kids.
And one of Australia's biggest drug bosses. So which footy star fooled us all?
I had no idea of the magnitude of it.
Who he corrupted to smuggle in the billions worth of drugs is unbelievable.
It was very difficult and very, very risky.
But you'd never imagine the ways he got it into our suburbs.
The chefs were helping hide the cocaine where they were cooking the bacon and eggs.
But who is it? 17 Gangs of Oz, next Wednesday.
Missed an episode of Gangs of Oz? Catch up at Yahoo 7 TV. Just click +7. Now all your favourite shows are in one place.